It's never what happens inside the OR that's the hardest change. It's everything outside.
My name's Collin Hart.
And my name's Michael McClain with LeftCoast Healthcare Advisors. And together, we're going to talk about ASC development and how to make it easier for you.
In this video, we'll cover an effective framework for solving problems in your ASC. So Michael, when a client comes to you with a problem, how do you approach solving it? What's the solution?
You know, we really think of all projects very similarly when it comes to growth. We think about 5 main areas. We think about the financial dimension of a project, meaning how much it's going to cost. What's the real cost of the project? We think about reimbursement. How much am I going to pay and how long is it going to take to get paid? We think about, volume. How many cases are we going to add and how long is it going to take to get that volume? And do I believe my physician? That's a whole nother discussion that we'll get into here in a second. We then think about the change impact. And so there's really kind of 2 elements of change. There's a change administratively or the business office side of it, where things like prior auths and changes to staff schedules and patient discharge criteria. And then there's the clinical change. If you're adding new or complex cases, what happens when you have to change your anesthesia provider? You have to change your medication. You have to change other elements like that. And so those 5 elements, we ask that all clients take a look at, take a deep dive into each one of those and start to think about, have you looked at all these holistically? And then where do you go from there?
And so if you're looking at those 5 elements, would you say any one is more important than the other?
I started my career in operations. So I think people are one of the most important parts. Understanding the operational change, how you actually effectuate that change. It's one thing to say we're going to do more. How you actually accomplish it, I think, is a big piece of it. So what is going to be the impact on your staff, on your surgeons, on your existing physicians, making it a holistic change? It's never what happens inside the OR that's the hardest change. It's everything outside the OR.
Sure.
What happens to the building, what happens to the staff, what happens to the receptionist. Those are what make or break changes, right? I think the second, though, most important part, and probably the one we see missed the most often, is reimbursement.
Okay.
Reimbursement in the ASC environment is complicated. And the assumption that just because we get paid to do this procedure, that we're going to get paid similarly for another procedure, that trips a lot of folks up. And changing that reimbursement sometimes can take 6 months, 12 months, 18 months. And if you don't have the right reimbursement in place to pay for your costs plus a margin from day one, that means you're losing money day one. And you're communicating to your payers, whatever you pay me is fine.
Yeah.
So you really want to do that homework around understanding that true cost. How do I get that reimbursement? And have that planned before you ever start doing cases. I think there's an assumption that, well, we can just do a couple and then we can go to the payers and figure it out. You do a couple, you've just told the payer you can do it just fine for what you're getting paid today.
Yeah.
And they get upside down.
And if I think about that and I hear you on people and reimbursements, and those are certainly important, but I also think about those 5 factors that you mentioned, almost like a wheel, right? And so your car can't drive if your wheel is lopsided. So I'm assuming it's still important that all of these pieces are in check.
And it's interesting that it's sort of a continuous evaluation. You understand your initial costs. You then move on to understanding, how am I going to get reimbursed? Maybe you can only get reimbursed for some payers up front. There's a capital cost. You have to maybe make some investments. You understand your volume, and then you move forward. And so you keep going back. Maybe you can do a little more, do a little more, do a little more.
Great. Well, I look forward to diving more into each of those elements as we progress in the series.
Sounds great.
Thanks, Michael.